Alright, so now that we have written some basic tests, we also covered some of the basics of unit testing. We talked about mocking, how to actually mock functions, how to mock modules, and how to stub out data so that we can actually pass them in for the function that we're testing. Let's go ahead and write some more tests because practice makes, close to perfect. Not perfect, but close to perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and write a test for this verify function for our Discord strategy. So what I'm talking about is this function right over here. We want to make sure that this function, the logic of this function is actually working. Okay, and I'll kind of walk you through how this function is going to work and what we actually need to test. Before I do it though, let me just remove all of these console logs real quick. I just want to tidy up some code, just so that way we don't have to see all of this stuff on here. And let me also do one thing. Let me just fix up this this code. I'm just gonna make it so that we don't have too many lines because it just looks really ugly right now. So that way what I'm doing is I'm destructuring the ID and I'm renaming it as Discord ID because I'm using it down here anyways, because I'm using it up top over here and down here, so might as well clean it up, right? Okay, perfect. So that looks a lot better. Let's copy this function because right now this function that we're trying to test, there's no way that we can test this unless if we were to write an end-to-end test. Okay, but remember, we want to always write unit tests for as many things as we can. Practically everything that you can test, you should definitely write a test for. Okay, so let's take this function because right now it's an anonymous function and there's no way that we can import this, import this individual function itself into a file and test it. So let's go ahead and copy this. I'll go up here and I'll create a function or async function and I'll call this Discord strategy or Discord verify function. And let me just kind of just copy this and just remove this part and remove this part over here. Okay, so we have the same parameters. It's just that this function is now a named function and we're going to pass that named function as a parameter. So Discord verify function, and it works literally the same exact way. Okay, all right, so let's go into the tests folder. Let's create a new folder called strategies. Did I put this in the right place? There we go. It was inside the controllers folder. Let's create a new file called discord.spec.js. Okay, and let's go ahead and write our test. So first, let's obviously import this function. So const Discord verify function require from, and again, if you're using imports, that's also fine. If you have it set up with Babel, that's also fine. Again, it works the same exact way. So we're going to import this from strategies Discord. Okay, so this is where we're going to get the Discord verify function from the strategies discord.js file. Oh yeah, I forgot to export it. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. So module.exports equals Discord verify function. Perfect. So make sure you export that. I was a little bit confused why it wasn't popping up when I used the dot operator, but okay, it works now. All right, so we want to write a test for this function, but before we do that, we have to actually understand what exactly this function does. So let's walk through this real quick. Okay, so let's see. So the first thing that we do is we have 4 parameters, so we're gonna have to pass in 4 values whenever we call this function. One of them that's very important is the profile parameter. Okay, and this represents the profile that is fetched from the OAuth provider. So in our case, Discord. So we're going to need to stub out this profile data with some fields. And what fields do we actually need? Well, it seems like the only field that we're really using at the moment is the Discord ID. So we're going to have to create an object that has an ID property. Okay. After that, we have a try catch. Okay, so we have, let's see, we have Discord user. We're calling find one on this Discord user model. Okay, so we're going to have to search for the user, and then we're going to have to check to see if the user was found. And if the user was found, we're going to return done. And If the user was not found, we're going to have to create a new user and then return done. So it seems like the first thing that we're going to, at least the first part where we're going to test everything inside this try block, there's two things that could possibly happen. We could either have a Discord user or we could not have one. So if we have the Discord user, we'll return just done. And if we don't, we'll go ahead and call Discord user. So what you should be thinking of is, okay, well, we're going to have to mock out this find one function, because remember, we're writing a unit test. We don't want to hit the actual database. So we're going to write two tests, right? In the first test, we'll write one that mocks find one and it returns an actual Discord user, which will then resolve into a truthy value. So then we'll write an assertion for find one being called with the correct Discord ID, and then we'll write another assertion where done is called with null as the error, and then the actual Discord user that was returned from the database. In our case, it'd be a mock, right? Then in the second test, we'll write one where we assert that find one was called, but Discord user is undefined. So we're gonna have to mock this method call to return undefined, which will then jump to this else block, and then we'll write an assertion for this Discord user dot create method. So we'll assert that it was called with Discord ID, and then we'll write another assertion where done was called with the new user. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead and actually write the test. So it should return user if found. Let's make this an async function, and we're going to go ahead and call Discord verify function, but we're going to have to pass in 4 parameters. So let's just go ahead and stub them out. So const access token, and for stubs you can literally put whatever you want, doesn't really matter. I'll put 456. Const profile ID will be a string. We'll just put in a random ID. And again, if your verify function needed other data from the profile, such as if you were saving the username, the email address, you would obviously need to stub them out inside this object as well. Whatever you're referencing, you need to make sure you're stubbing out. Otherwise, you're going to get a reference or undefined error. Okay. Let's pass in those parameters. And we're going to pass in the done function. So this one's going to be a little bit weird. So done is going to take in, let's see, I'm trying to think what would be a good way to handle this. I think I'll just make this a just.fn. So just a mock function, really. And this mock function typically takes in 2 parameters, so x and y. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. We'll just leave it like this for now. We'll pass it in here. Because the only thing that we're going to be doing with this function is just asserting that it's been called with the correct parameters. Okay, so let's go ahead and run our test. Let's do yarn test. And we can actually pass in a pattern. So this will look for files that match this Discord pattern. You can actually pass in a regular expression. Okay. So right now, the reason why this test is failing and also it took forever is because we have not mocked anything out yet. So we're going to actually mock out this Discord user find one. So what's actually happening is it's actually trying to interact with the database, but we're not even connected to the database. Okay. So let's go ahead and mock out Discord user.find one. So we're going to do this similar to how we did this inside the auth.spec.js file, where we mocked the user schema. So first thing we'll do is we'll import Discord user. So we'll import that from database, schemas, Discord user. Okay. And there's multiple ways that you can mock this. So in the previous episode where I showed you how to, or where I first showed you how to unit test and mock, we actually mocked the implementation. So the implementation of the method inside each test. Right? But you can actually just do that using the factory pattern. But I'm not going to do that, but I just thought I would mention that to you all in case you wanted to try it out. So for example, you could do something like just.mock, and then you could pass in the path to the module, and then return a factory, and then do something like find one just.fn, something like that. You could do something like that. Similar to what we did with the hash password. Okay, you could use the factory pattern. But definitely check out the Jest docs for more information about that. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. So we're going to first mock everything out. So let's do Discord user dot find. Not find one. Is it find one? Yeah, let me double check. It's find one, yes. So we're going to go ahead and mock find one. So Discord user dot find one. So we can either mock the implementation like we did with user.findOne, which really all it does is just returns, we just pass in a callback function that just ends up returning a function. But we can actually just, instead of using mock implementation, we can just do mock resolve value. So mock resolve value, and we'll do mock resolve value once. Okay. So all we'll do is, whoops, not a function. We'll just pass in a simple user. So what is that going to look like? Well, think about what your database model will look like. So it's going to have an ID. So we'll just do something like, ID 123, Discord ID, Discord ID. And I think that's really all we have. Let's just double check. Let's look at our schemas. We only have a Discord ID and a created at. So for created at, you can literally just pass in whatever you want. I'll just pass in a new date. Doesn't really matter. If you need this to be a specific timestamp, you could obviously hard code that if you want to. Okay, so let's go ahead and run the test, and we should see that it should actually just pass. Let's see. Discord user find one mock resolved value once. Let me see. Oh yeah, I forgot to do one thing real quick. So we actually have to mock this whole module. So we actually have to pass in the path to this module as well. Because right now we only have the schema that's being imported, or the model I should say. But we haven't actually mocked the whole thing yet. So let's do that. So now Jest is going to take this whole module and then pretty much take all of its functions and mock all of them. So we can actually call mock resolve value once. So let's run it again. And there you go, it passes. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue testing. So what's next is we should then write an assertion, right? Because we haven't actually tested anything. We just literally mocked something and we called the function. We have not tested anything yet. So what exactly do we want to test? Well, first let's test to make sure that, let's write an assertion that Discord user find one was called with the correct Discord ID. So let's go ahead and do this. Expect Discord user.find one to have been called with, and what exactly do we want to pass in? Well, you can see that find one is going to take in an object that has this Discord ID property. So we're also going to assert that it's been called with an object with a property called Discord ID, and the value of that's just going to be Discord underscore ID. Let's save and let's run that test and let's see what happens. And you're going to see that, did I pass in the wrong value? Let's see. Oh yeah, wait, my bad. I actually passed in the value for the mock that was returned. Let me actually change it. Let me actually change this to this right over here. Or I can better yet do profile.id if I want to. That'll be better. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So to have been called with the value here. Yes. There we go. Yeah, my bad. I was actually using the mocked resolved value, which obviously is not going to work. Okay, because we're calling find one with the ID that comes from the profile. Okay, but now you can see that it passes. Okay, great. And you can see that previously the example that I showed you before, it failed if we passed an invalid value, which shows you that this function is being called with the correct parameters. All right, so what's next? Well, we know that we are mocking a return value for find one. So now we should write an assertion to ensure that this function done is going to be called with Discord user. So that Discord user is going to be this resolved value over here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and copy this and just do mock user and just pass that in over here. So that way I can reuse this stub. Okay. So let's go ahead and write an assertion. Let's just say expect done to have been called with. And what exactly are we going to check to see what it's been called with? Well, null and not here, right over here. Null and Discord user. Okay, and Discord user is just this value over here, which we are mocking, or which we are mocking. So let's pass in null and mocked user. And let's run the test again. Okay, there we go. Let's go ahead and pass in an empty object, and let's run the test, and let's see that it should fail. And you can see that it expected an empty object, but it received an actual populated object, which is great. Okay, so now that we have tested this part, we are done testing this if part over here. So now we can go ahead and write another unit test to test this else part. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. A couple things that I'll show you, of course, is we can actually group together our tests using a describe block. So this is a great way to, have test suites. So for example, Discord verify function, I can group everything together inside this describe block, which also, it looks similar to the it and test, right? We just pass in a string and then pass in the callback function, and inside that callback function, it's going to execute all of these tests. Okay, so I just thought I'd mention that for those who are interested. Okay, there's also a lot of other stuff too that you can do with Jest, but I don't want to really go into that because this isn't really a Jest crash course. We're just really specific. It's really just tailored to just testing Express applications. I'm kind of assuming that you do know a little bit about Jest, but I will, clarify some things that you might not be familiar with, just in case. Okay, but let's go ahead and write another test. So let's go ahead and do this. It should create a user if not found. So it should create user and return if not found. So let's pass in an asynchronous callback function. And now let's go ahead and write the test for this. So what do we have to do again? Well, we're going to have to do the same exact thing where we mock the resolve value of find1. Okay, and this time we're going to return null, of course, because we want to make sure we are hitting the else block. Okay, so let's copy this part. Let's pass in undefined or null, doesn't really, you can even pass in false as well. Any false value will work. Okay, so now we're going to need to mock the Discord user.create method call. So what I'll do is I'll do that right over here. So Discord user.create, and then we'll go ahead and do mock. We'll do mock resolved value as well. Okay, so mock resolved value once, and then we're gonna go ahead and return a fake new user. So I'll go ahead and create a local variable. So new user, Discord ID 123, created at new date. Okay, so we'll just resolve that. Okay, so now that we have mocked both create and find1, now we can actually start to write an assertion. Okay, so first let's assert expect. Okay, the first thing that we'll do is write an assertion for find1. So expect Discord user.find1 to have been called with. And so what exactly is it going to be called with? Well, this Discord ID, which comes from profile, which is which we actually have stubbed up here. But remember, we actually have to call the verify function. So let's go ahead and call that. Very first thing that we should do is call it. Whoops, right over here. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have to call the function first and then write the assertion. So excuse me for forgetting about that. So await Discord verify function. Okay, so to have been called with, and then we're going to pass in the ID that comes from over here. Okay, So to have been called with Discord ID, and that's just going to be profile.id right over here. Or you can just hard code this, but I'm just going to do profile ID, and I'll just change it up here as well. In case we change it up there, it'll also match. Okay, so yes, we're expecting Discord user.find1 to be called with the Discord ID that is from the profile. Okay, now one more assertion that we have not written yet is we actually haven't written an assertion to check the return value of something. Well, let's write one. Well, first let's just make sure that this test works. So let's run this test. Let's make sure that this assertion works. So both of them passed, great. So let's go ahead and write our assertion. So we're going to go ahead and assert that this find1 method call is going to actually, in fact, return undefined, which will give us confidence that it's going to go ahead and execute the else block, which will then try to create a new Discord user in our database. So we can use to have returned with and pass in the value. So the expected value. So to have returned with is also another matcher that we can use. So we can go ahead and say undefined, which is really going to match whatever value up here is because we mocked it. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this test and let's see what happens. Whoops, let me do yarn test Discord. Let's see, why is it doing this? Seems like it's giving an empty object instead of undefined. That's quite interesting. Let me actually try this instead. Let me do mock implementation once. And let me try this again. Because it should be undefined instead of an object. Okay, there we go. That's better. Okay, that's great. So yeah, let me just leave it like that for now. So we want to make sure that it actually does return undefined. Great. So now that we've written that assertion, let's go ahead and continue. So let's go ahead and assert that Discord user.create was called. And then we'll write an assertion for this done function to be called with the new user. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and write an assertion where Discord user.create was called. And what is it going to be called with? The Discord ID. Okay, so that Discord ID is just going to be 123. Now, obviously, it should be profile.id. Okay, because we did in fact mock it up here. But actually, let me do this. Actually, no, we actually need to do this instead. Let me actually do this. I don't want to use the stub or this mock that I create up here. Let me actually create a new mock. So let's do const profile. And let me actually do this. Let me do that. Okay. And let me copy this and paste that here. Okay, so I'm going to pass a new profile. So that way it's consistent. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and assert that Discord user.create was called with Discord ID, and that Discord ID is 123, which is going to be retrieved from new profile, which is passed in as an argument to this function. Okay, because remember, we're getting that profile ID from this profile argument over here. So it's very important that we actually mock this out correctly. All right. So now that we've written this assertion, we'll then run the test again. Let's make sure that it passes. And let's see. So it's saying that it was called with undefined. Okay. So it seems like the reason why that's happening is, let's see, where is it failing? Oh wait, hold on, I messed up. This should be new profile.discord ID. Wait, actually no, it should be new profile. This field should be ID, right? And not Discord ID. So that, I think that's one of the problems. Yeah, so yeah, that was my bad. So let me go back to my console. Let's run the test again. Hopefully this okay, there we go. Okay, yeah, it was a really silly error. This is why I wish I had used TypeScript instead, because it would have picked that up very quickly. Okay, so the problem was that I obviously had this named Discord ID instead of ID. Okay, so cool. So you can see that now when we write the assertion for Discord user dot create to have been called with Discord ID 123. Okay, you can see that the test passes. Okay, so whatever value I pass in for new profile. So if I pass in 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I go and pass in 1, 2, 3, 4 here, and if I run the test, it's going to pass. If I were to change this back to 1, 2, 3, but I kept the ID of 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going to see that it's going to fail because the actual ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, right? That's some Discord ID, for example, right? And we're trying to write an assertion to say that it's being called with an ID that doesn't match this, which obviously is going to fail. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, right? So just to give you a rundown, right? We basically take the Discord ID, which is the ID of the profile, which is this ID over here. Okay, and then we use that to create a new Discord user. Let's go ahead and write one last assertion, and that's just going to be the assertion for the done function. So let's make sure that done was called with no error, and then for the user, we'll just pass in a new user, which we created right over here. Okay, and keep in mind that we also mocked the value of create. So right over here, whatever value create is going to return, that is going to be passed in for new user. So in our test, we mocked the resolved value of create, Discord user.create, and we're basically resolving this new user, okay, this new user object that we created, and then so that way we can actually reuse this, okay? So we know that in the actual test, it will actually call done with this new user. So let's run the test again, and it should succeed. And there we go. If I were to actually change like the value of new user, actually not this. Let me actually change it to, let me actually just pass in an empty object and show you. It's going to fail. Okay, similar to what we did up above earlier. All right, so let's go ahead and Control Z. All right, cool. So we tested out these two functionalities. Okay. Now, one last thing that I will mention is that you're probably wondering, well, how can we actually test this try catch, like this whole thing? Like, how would we like write an assertion for like the error? So this could actually be a little bit complicated just given the nature of our logic, because right now we're not throwing any error down here. Okay. Like we're not throwing any error inside this try block like manually, so it's not going to catch our own errors. It would only catch the error if, let's say, for example, the database is failing, right? And the only way that this would actually error out is if, for example, the database literally threw an error. For situations like this, it's actually a lot better to use end-to-end testing instead. Okay, so it's better to use end-to-end testing to ensure that this actually works. Okay, so don't worry about unit testing like this try catch. Usually it's better to do end-to-end testing for that. Just testing these two blocks will be fine. But if you actually want to test to see if like this try catch actually will return done with the error and no user, what I would recommend is you can actually do some kind of like validation in here and throw like an error for given some kind of circumstance. Do I think it would be better if you actually did that? If you actually did that inside the local JS. So for example, it would make sense to actually test this try catch with our local strategy, because you can see over here that we actually do throw some errors which get caught down over here. And then what we can do is we can then write an assertion that this function is going to throw an error, and then we just assert that this function done is going to be called with the error and with the with null as the user. Okay, but just thought I'd mention that in case those of you are wondering. So that's going to be pretty much it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Peace out.